Thank you. That concludes topical questions. The next item of business is a statement by Shirley-Anne Somerville on tackling child poverty delivery plan, annual progress reports 2024 to 2025. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. I call on the Cabinet Secretary up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government has today published our annual progress report on child poverty, setting out detail of our continued implementation of Best Start Bright Futures and reporting against the interim child poverty targets unanimously agreed by this Parliament. The past year has seen the Scottish Government face some of the most challenging fiscal circumstances in the history of devolution, but we know the pressures on families in poverty has been greater still. This report highlights that despite these challenges and the continued detrimental impact of UK Government decision-making, we are making real progress in Scotland, which is changing the lives of families. We are committed to building on these firm foundations and remain unequivocal in our commitment to meeting the 2030 targets and to tackling the scourge of child poverty in our society. Looking firstly to the interim target, statistics published in March and presented in today's report show that despite significant challenges, levels of both relative and absolute poverty reduced in 2023-24. Whilst the long-term trend remains broadly stable, the proportion of children living in relative poverty in 23-24 was the lowest since 2014-15, while the proportion in absolute poverty was the lowest in 30 years. Rates of both relative and absolute poverty stood 9 percentage points below the UK average in 23-24. And to put this in context, were rates to be the same in Scotland, this would be equivalent to 90,000 additional children in poverty. And while the JRF predict child poverty will rise in other parts of the UK by 2029, they highlight that policies such as the Scottish Government's Scottish Child Payment and our commitment to mitigate the two-child limit are behind Scotland bucking the trend. Though our policies are having to work harder than ever to make a difference, modelling published by the Government in March reinforces the significant impact they are having. It is estimated that the lowest income families will be on average £2,600 better off this year as a result of our policies, with this figure increasing to an estimated £3,700 by the end of the decade. Presiding Officer, as set out in this report, there is no single reason that the interim targets have not been met. A wide range of factors, including the headwinds of more than a decade of UK Government austerity, to Brexit and the COVID pandemic, have all made meeting the interim targets particularly challenging. However, data reinforces the significant impact of UK Government policies which have worked against us, not least the two-child limit, which has seen poverty rates rise in larger families, while they have fallen for families with one or two children. It is deeply disappointing that the interim targets have not been met. However, we have made progress and we will continue to build on those foundations to reach the 2030 targets. Looking to delivery in the past year, 2024-25 saw some of the most challenging fiscal circumstances in the history of devolution, as the outgoing Chancellor delivered unfunded tax cuts at the expense of public services and support for struggling families. Combined with the failure to inflation-proof capital budgets, that meant we had to make difficult decisions to prioritise spend and protect the most vulnerable in our society. Even so, we continued to invest more than £1.4 billion in support benefiting children in low-income families. This investment enabled us to continue delivering critical support. This includes awarding more than £455 million to families through the Scottish Child Payment, providing support for over 6,000 parents through devolved employability services, and mitigating the UK Government's benefit cap to support almost 10,000 children. We have also taken steps to further strengthen support available. This includes through the expansion of our ambitious Fairer Futures partnerships into 5 more local authority areas, expansion of our successful council tax debt pilot project into 6 new local authority areas, and through delivery of a second round of our Child Poverty Practice Accelerator Fund, supporting a range of innovative local action. And we responded to the emerging needs of families, delivering £2.9 million of funding to cancel historic school meal debt and a £41 million package of measures to support households struggling with energy costs over the winter period. As set out in the report, 68 of the 113 actions reported on this year were either completed or delivering at scale, an increase from 60 as of March 2024. The action we have taken stands in stark contrast to that of the current and previous UK Government. While I, of course, welcome the establishment of the UK Government's Child Poverty Task Force and early actions including the fair repayment rate in universal credit and the Employment Rights Bill, the reality is that action taken so far has lacked the necessary urgency and fails to meet the scale of the challenge faced. It is deeply disappointing that the two-child limit remains UK Government policy. A policy which is estimated to have pulled over 35,000 children into poverty since July last year, and which is estimated to pull a further 20,000 children into poverty by the autumn, unless it is scrapped. This inaction is made worse still by the UK Government's plans to make deep cuts to social security for disabled people. The DWP's own impact assessments highlight that by 2029-30, an estimated 3.9 million families will lose out as a result of reforms, and that they risk driving an additional 250,000 people across the UK, including 50,000 children, into poverty. And I would urge the UK Government to reverse these damaging cuts and to work with us in eradicating child poverty. The actions of this Government show that another way is possible, and one which gives us hope for the future. In the final year of Best Start Bright Futures and of this Parliament, we will continue to drive forward progress towards the 2030 targets and take steps to improve the lives and outcomes of families. This includes further investment in childcare, delivering more free breakfast club places, providing additional support in school holidays for children with disability, and expanding our Extra Time partnership with the Scottish Football Association so that 5,000 children and their families can benefit. It includes £768 million for our affordable housing supply programme, enabling the delivery of more than 8,000 homes, with £40 million targeted to local authorities with the most sustained temporary accommodation pressures. And it also includes further expanding provision of free school meals, so around 25,000 children and young people can further benefit. Presiding Officer, because of the UK Government failing to act, we urgently are driving forward to effectively scrap the impact of the Universal Credit two-child cap in Scotland. And I'm pleased to announce today that, subject to the passing of the necessary legislation, Social Security Scotland will accept applications for the two-child limit payment from the 2nd of March 2026, with payments beginning as soon as possible after that date. The Scottish Fiscal Commission estimate that mitigation payments will be made in respect of 43,000 children at a total cost of £155 million in 25-26, rising to 50,000 children and £194 million by 2029-30. This mitigation is estimated to reduce the number of children living in poverty next year by 20,000. Not only that, but it will significantly reduce the depth of poverty for thousands more as a result of payments which could be worth over £3,500 per child. As the First Minister has said, if the UK Government do the right thing and scrap the cap, we are committed to investing mitigation spend into further ambitious measures to tackle child poverty, enabling us to accelerate progress in the years ahead. Presiding Officer, alongside our continued focus on delivery, we have already begun to engage with partners and with this Parliament to inform the development of the next Tackling Child Poverty Delivery Plan. This includes launching our call for evidence in February and working with partners, including Young Scot, the Poverty Alliance and Changing Realities, to meaningfully engage children and young people and parents themselves to help inform the next plan. The plan will also be informed by new research we have published today, including the outputs from a review of international approaches to tackling child poverty and research focused on gender and child poverty, and by both the final report from our independent expert group on the minimum income guarantee and the advice of the Poverty and Inequality Commission. Covering 2026 to 31, this will be the final plan ahead of the 2030 targets and will be taken forward by the Scottish Government formed over the next Holyrood elections. This offers the opportunity to build consensus across the Parliament and across Scotland on the actions that need to be taken in the years ahead, and I thank the committees for their input to date and look forward to engaging with members across the Chamber as we continue this important work. Presiding Officer, together with our partners, including local government, we will continue to do everything within the scope of our powers and our budget to continue driving progress towards the 2030 targets unanimously agreed by the Scottish Parliament. I urge the UK Government to match the ambition and investment of the Scottish Government and to work with us to help end child poverty. And I encourage all members, regardless of our political beliefs, to work with the Government to develop a plan that will build on the progress made and deliver enduring reductions in child poverty for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business. I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press the request to speak button now. And I call Liz Smith.
Thank you. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her prior sight and can put on the record again that the Scottish Conservatives, like all other parties in the Chamber, absolutely see child poverty as an important issue. Cabinet Secretary, can I just concentrate my questions, please, on the Scottish Fiscal Commission's most recent report, where it says that the Scottish Government's mitigation of the two-child cap would be one of two major contributing factors to the widening gap between social security spend in Scotland and the available funding. So can I ask where the other cuts will be made to pay for that mitigation? Secondly, how will the Cabinet Secretary respond to the claims from some independent economic analysts that this mitigation will create perverse incentives against working at a time when Scotland is already facing significant higher percentages in economic inactivity than elsewhere? Does she think that that might just be the reason why a lot of members of the public actually support the two-child cap? And finally, can I just ask again from the Scottish Fiscal Commission, it's calculated that the mitigation will be £156 million in 2026-27 and rising to £199 million, which I think is a slightly different figure from the Cabinet Secretary's, over the period to 2029-30. Can the Cabinet Secretary explain why that is a 27.5% increase in that short period of time?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On the last point, there are a number of children who will be brought in to the two-child cap because of the way that it moves and brings more families in as they age. And that's why there's a difference in the numbers. And I do take the point that Liz Smith mentions about dealing with economic activity. That's exactly why the Deputy First Minister and other ministers have been absolutely resolute in our determination to assist people, if they are economically active, to move into employment, whether that's through employability schemes or child care schemes. But it's important that we do that by supporting people out of economic inactivity rather than punishing them for having children, which is exactly what the two-child cap does, Presiding Officer. Liz Smith's also right to say that some of the challenges around the Scottish Fiscal Commission's forecasting around the cost of social security is because of the decisions this government has made to keep children out of poverty because of the two-child cap, and by the UK Government's determination to push children into poverty by reducing the spend on disabled people. Those are choices that we have taken to ensure that we are protecting disabled people and children, because we need to protect them from the effects of poverty. And those are decisions which will obviously be set out in the work that has been taken forward by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance as we look to the sustainability of our finances. We recognise that challenge. Can I say, Presiding Officer, finally, the easiest way to deal with that challenge is for the UK Government to actually follow onto the principles it claims to have and actually scrap the two-child cap and scrap their proposals to cut disabled benefits, and that would take away the two challenges that Liz Smith points to.
Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement, both at the usual time and in her morning press exclusives. There's been a lot of spin, and there is in the statement a myriad of excuses, but the reality is there is also failure, because for all the rhetoric we've had from the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary, after 18 years in office, relative child poverty after housing costs has only fallen by 1%. And when the Cabinet Secretary says that rates are broadly stable, what she really means is that the dial hasn't shifted. Now, on the two-child limit, Scottish Labour have been consistently clear over the history of the policy that we want to see it scrapped, but a haphazard and last-minute decision to include it in the budget makes a mockery of the claim that the Cabinet Secretary made over many years that she was powerless to do anything about it. And I note the letter that has been issued as we meet here this afternoon that has outlined that applications will be open, but doesn't say when payments will be made, and talks about using Scottish child payment data, something that the Cabinet Secretary wasn't willing to admit in the past. If I can, just on the wider picture facing Scotland's young people and the root causes of child poverty, responsibility for failing to meet these targets lies with the Scottish Government. It's the SNP that failed to deliver on their commitments to expanding free school meals, it is the SNP that stripped employability services to the bone, and it is the SNP who created a housing emergency that has 10,000 children in temporary accommodation. So isn't the truth that more of the same will not deliver the 2030 targets, and that the SNP government is out of ideas and out of time to meaningfully reduce child poverty?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, what Labour have delivered since they've came into power is a review on universal credit, and they've delayed a task force report in child poverty. And the reason the Scottish Government stepped forward at the last budget is because some people, and I can appreciate where they came from on this, some people actually thought that a change of government, Conservative to Labour, would actually make a difference. And it didn't. And that's exactly why the Scottish Government will deliver the effective scrapping of the two-child cap when Labour have failed to do so. That's exactly why we are determined to move forward with this, and quicker than we had originally thought we could. The payments will come after people apply, depending on when their universal credit is paid. And that's exactly because of the fact that we have a devolved system that relies on parts of the system that is reserved to universal credit. So the simple way, Presiding Officer, for us to deal with this would be to have all the powers here, not be reliant whatsoever on a Labour government, and not on the false hopes that they promised before an election and that you continue fail to deliver on afterwards.
Emma Harper, to be followed by Ros McCall. Emma Harper.
Thank you. Just having an iPad issue, Presiding Officer. Got it. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. It has previously been reported that the rate of child poverty among rural Dumfries and Galloway communities has hit a record high, and that Dumfries and Galloway had a child poverty rate of 26.9% for 2022-2023. So given the clear link between Labour's policy of the two-child cap and child poverty, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to update us again in the Chamber on the Scottish Government's plans to end the impact of the two-child cap in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I've confirmed today, we will bring forward the opening of applications on the 2nd of March. That is earlier than we had planned, but again goes to our determination to move as quickly as possible on this issue. And Emma Harper's quite right to point to the challenge of poverty in rural issues and indeed in other communities across Scotland. And the level of poverty, particularly on larger families, is absolutely related to the impact of the two-child cap. And that's exactly why campaigners have been campaigning for this change. That's why they are disappointed that the UK Government have refused to come forward with this policy, and exactly why we will deliver it on the 2nd of March.
Ros McCall, to be followed by Marie McNair.
Thank you. Access to affordable, good-quality childcare is essential to supporting parents back into work. And this was highlighted in the Social Justice and Social Security's report last year, and it's a recognised route out of poverty. Now, this report highlights the recruitment of 40 new childminders as a result of the programme for Scotland's childminding future, which is, of course, welcome. However, it equates to roughly 1.25 new childminders per local authority. Given the Scottish Government's expansion of early years childcare from August 21 was predicated on working with the private sector and childminders, since then Scotland has lost 255 childminders in 22-23 alone and has almost halved its total since it came in. So does the Cabinet Secretary think that this recruitment drive goes anywhere near far enough to address the shortage, which is entirely down to their own making? And when will the barriers to parental employment be properly addressed?
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, I detailed in my statement some of the work that has been undertaken and some of the work that will be undertaken next year to assist with the delivery both of early learning and childcare and out-of-hours support for working families. So our expansion of early learning and childcare has been exceptionally important. Scotland is the only part of the UK to already offer 1140 hours a year of funded ALC to all 3- and 4-year-olds and the eligible twos. And childminders are a very important part. They are one part, but they're a very important part of the flexibility that will be taken forward. So the encouragement and the work that's been undertaken to support further childminders into early learning and childcare is exceptionally important, as is the work that's been taken forward in our 23 early adopter communities, and looking at the work on the school-age childcare programme, the work I've mentioned by, for example, the Extra Time programme and our Bright Start breakfasts are some of the policies that are helping not just for early learning and childcare and the different types of approach that may be suitable for families, and also the work that's been undertaken on school-age childcare to support that flexibility that people do need when they're looking to either get into the workplace or to expand hours.
Marie McNair, to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement. Cabinet Secretary, can I ask what engagement you've had with the Secretary of State for Scotland in relation to the development of a UK-wide child poverty strategy?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State in the Scotland Office joined the most recent meeting of Task Force Ministers on the 14th of May. I would say that the work that has been undertaken on a four-nation basis on the Child Poverty Task Force from the UK Government has been exceptionally disappointing. It has not allowed for the level of in-depth discussions that certainly the Scottish Government had wished to see, and which we had expected, given the discussions between the First Minister and the Prime Minister about a resetting of relationships when the new UK Government came in. Clearly, we're very concerned about the delay in the Child Poverty Task Force report as well, because that seems to suggest that there's also a delay in action coming from that as well. But we have asked for clarity from the Task Force co-chairs to ensure that we can at least get some idea of what might be in that report and its impact not just on children, but what we can do with the UK Government to support even further children.
Pam Duncan-Glancy, to be followed by Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Data out today shows that the numbers of young people in the most deprived communities going on to a positive destination fell to the lowest point since 2019, with the gap widening. The impact of the SNP's failure to meet the interim child poverty targets is leaving Scotland's most disadvantaged pupils behind. And what's fundamentally wrong with this government's approach is that it refuses to change direction or address the root causes of poverty, of which education and skills is key. There is precious little from the government on this today. The tertiary education bill mentioned has been roundly rejected by stakeholders, and colleges, key to lifting people out of poverty, barely get a mention, with nothing to address budget concerns, nothing to address course closures and nothing to address staff and them losing their jobs. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what will it take for this government to realise that education and colleges are key to lifting people out of poverty?
Cabinet Secretary.
Education is critical to our approach. That's exactly why, Presiding Officer, we are investing up to £1 billion in the Scottish Attainment Challenge this Parliament, including in pupil equity funding, to empower our head teachers to take the best possible approaches that suit the need of their pupils. And that's an exceptionally important piece of the work that we're undertaking. And the poverty-related attainment gap between young people from the most and least deprived areas meeting standards in literacy is at a record low in primary schools. So we are seeing progress, presiding officer. And it is very important that we also look to our colleges and to our universities to encourage young people on whatever path they choose. But what I think we've said once again from Labour is a long list of suggestions of how to spend money, and absolutely no responsibility to actually bringing forward plans on how any of that would be paid for. I'm not surprised, but I continue to be disappointed by that, presiding officer.
Emma Roddick, to be followed by Maggie Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note that Professor Danny Dorling has published a piece praising the work of the Scottish Government on tackling child poverty. He said that Scotland has shown what can be done and what needs to be done. With Scotland setting an example of what can be achieved, he does predict that Westminster will be forced to act itself. So I'd be keen to understand from the Cabinet Secretary if the UK Government has acknowledged the success of the Scottish Child Payment and if there are any discussions on creating a UK-wide benefit. Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I am continually disappointed by the lack of progress at the UK Government on this, and there's a lot of back and forth on the Labour benches. I hope they're trying to confer amongst each other about how they can perhaps persuade their Labour colleagues down south, because I just spot a bit of uncomfortableness from the Scottish Labour Party today when we're bringing forward how to mitigate against a UK Labour Government. I never thought, presiding officer, that that's something I would need to see. But what we will do, whether it's on the UK Government's lack of action on the two-child cap or indeed in the learning of the Scottish Child Payment, we of course stand ready to assist the Government should they wish to take forward the policies which, as Professor Dorling has said, has made a major difference in tackling poverty in Scotland.
Maggie Chapman, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
A toolkit earlier this month that describes the wide-ranging transformations needed to meet the 2031 child poverty reduction targets. And it makes very clear the distinctions between poverty, deep poverty and very deep poverty. 1 in 3 children in poverty are in deep poverty and are over £1,000 a month away from getting out of poverty. Scottish Child Payment or employment support won't meet this gap. If we don't deal with very deep poverty, we won't reach our targets. So can the Cabinet Secretary say what holistic and targeted interventions are planned that will focus on families in deep and very deep poverty?
Cabinet Secretary.
Maggie Chapman is quite right to point to deep poverty as a specific challenge. The GRF in their UK Poverty Report of 2024 are clear that 6 successive UK Prime Ministers have overseen deepening poverty over the last 20 years, and they describe it, and I quote, as the social failure at scale. That's exactly why the Government also looks at not only how many children we can keep out of poverty, how many children we will assist in many different ways, but it's also about how we can help children out of deep poverty. So it is positive to see that the levels of deep poverty for children fell by 4 percentage points in 23-24. That's 40,000 children, fewer children in deep poverty because of the work being undertaken by the Scottish Government. But I recognise there is more to do, both for the Scottish Government and indeed for the UK Government on this issue.
Willie Rennie, to be followed by George Adam.
I'm afraid this statement this afternoon is wholly depressing. The Government seems to be more interested in attacks on the Labour Party than actually solving child poverty in this country. And we should have a direct focus. Because although I support the child payment, I think having direct cash payments is a good thing. It's not sustainable in the long term. We know that for the struggling families, but also for the public finances. We should be putting more investment into projects like relational mentoring with the BIES Group that I know the Government is supporting. But I wish there was more excitement about lifting families out of poverty in a sustainable way for the long term, rather than all the politicking that's going on this afternoon.
Cabinet Secretary.
I can appreciate Willie Rennie's frustration. What I would say is I have that frustration too. I'm perhaps having that frustration for a different reason, in that I can see what difference it would make if we had 2 governments rather than 1 government trying to lift people out of poverty. So I won't make any apologies for pointing out the reality that we're in. But he's quite right to point out the fact that it's not just about the Scottish Child Payment and it's not just about direct payments to people, but it's also about the work that we need to undertake. And I'll give some examples of the work that is contained in the report, which I briefly mentioned, around our Fairer Futures partnerships that are being expanded into more local authority areas, and the work that we're doing on this whole family holistic approach. That's exactly because I can see when I go on my visits, and the evidence shows that if we assist a young person and their family on the different challenges that are impacting on that family, we make the biggest difference. And it's a systemic change rather than a change of simply giving money out to assist them in the poverty that they're in immediacy. I don't think it's an either-or approach. I'm afraid it is when it comes to actually how to spend money, because we can either spend money on the Scottish Child Payment or on other issues. We, of course, can't spend it twice. But I do recognise his challenge that he rightly puts to the Government about not just the Scottish Child Payment, but that wider support that we need to give to people. And I hope when he sees and reads through the publication in detail, he will see that work, for example, through those Fairer Futures partnerships, and our determination to try and take that forward.
George Adam, to be followed by Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Unlike some, I see the positives of much of what the Cabinet Secretary said today. And I can see from the Cabinet Secretary's statement that the eradication of child poverty is clearly at the heart of the Scottish Government's plans and ambitions. Can I ask how measures and investments arising from this year's budget, 2025-26 budget, will specifically drive these plans forward?
Cabinet Secretary.
There are a number of areas within the budget for 25-26, Presiding Officer, that will assist the Government take forward the eradication of child poverty. Important amongst that is, of course, the 8,000 affordable homes, the expansion of free school meals to a further 25,000 children in low-income families, and continuing to deliver that unique support in our Scottish Child Payment. Importantly, as I saw on a visit very recently in Renfrewshire, the work that's been undertaken by the Extra Time Partnership to encourage young people to stay on at school, take part in the Extra Time Partnership activities. And I spoke to the parents who were there that night on how the difference that had made in allowing them to take on extra shifts or get back into employment themselves. And it was a very positive programme, which the budget for this year will allow us to expand further.
Megan Gallagher, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. But we're hearing the same thing time and time again. It's always someone else's fault when it comes to the SNP failing to achieve its own targets. But of course, the Scottish Government have promised to deliver a number of policies to eradicate child poverty over the years. Free laptops, free bikes, smaller classroom sizes, new swing parks, closing the attainment gap, and that is just to name a few. But not one of those has been delivered in full. But the question I want to go back to is an important question raised by my colleague Liz Smith regarding the mitigation of the two-child cap, because it does come down to the finances. And as Liz Smith rightly pointed out, the mitigation of this particular policy would be a significant contributing factor that would widen the social security budget pressures here. So can I simply ask the question, because I don't believe she answered it when Liz Smith asked it originally, how will this be funded?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, this is about setting out responsibilities. I've set out today the responsibilities that the Scottish Government feels very deeply, and I've set out the responsibilities that I expect the UK Government to have on child poverty as well. And again, I make no apology for that, because that is a simple statement of fact that if we want children to be lifted out of poverty, it would help if both governments were pointing in the same direction. And I'm concerned again when we discuss the level of expenditure on social security, which the Scottish Conservatives leader and others continuously say they won't cut. We have made decisions to scrap the two-child cap effectively, and we've made decisions to invest in the Scottish Child Payment because we want to lift children out of poverty. And what the Scottish Conservatives need to be very clear about to people is if they're wanting to cut that expenditure on social security, do they plan to take it from disabled people? like the Labour Party do they tend to take it from carers, or do they intend to take it from low-income families? So we will balance our budget in every year, as we always do, Presiding Officer. And the Cabinet Secretary for Finance will set out about the sustainability of our finances, but the Tories also need to come clean about who they're going to cut the benefits from: disabled people, low-income people or carers.
Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for outlining her vision and priority for lifting children out of poverty. And can I ask how UK Government policies are actively contributing to the problem? And what is the Government's assessment of the delays to the UK Government's Child Poverty Task Force?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, my assessment of the delay in the task force report is because I fear that the UK Government know that the impacts of their current policies that they're putting forward is actually making the situation worse rather than better. And I would point to one, Presiding Officer, which I hear is supposedly happening tomorrow, and that's the announcement from the UK Government on their determination to cut benefits for disabled people, which I mentioned earlier on, will push 50,000 children into poverty. So there's one policy which is apparently happening this week that will push 50,000 children into poverty at exactly the same time as I'm making a statement on how we lift children out of poverty, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement. There will be a brief pause before we move on to the next item of business. Front benches wish to take a moment to organise themselves.